Hello and welcome to That Nerd Thing, where we uncover the magical impact that fandoms have on our lives. I'm Morgan, and you may remember a few episodes ago on That Nerd Thing that I spoke with Erin Pascal, my friend who is an editor at Andrews McMeel Universal. And I am so grateful that she introduced me to today's guest, and I know all of you will really love his work. You might recognize him from watching his viral TikTok videos that really showcase his immersive storytelling abilities, or you might even recognize him from being a student of his in the past. I am so honored to introduce the author of the Matt Sprouse series, Matt Eicheldinger. Hello, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's cool to be here. I'm really excited.
I'm so excited too. And, I've started reading your book.
Oh, did you really? Cool.
Yeah. I got a copy and I was just like, oh my God, this is so cool. And yeah, it's awesome. So before we get into your nerdy identity, do you want to just tell listeners a little bit about your book let's see, this episode is coming out March 20th. Yeah, so your book is out by the time this episode is out.
Yeah, so it's pretty crazy. So I'll make a long story short. I'm 37. I wrote the book when I was about 21, my first year teaching. I wrote it for kids in my classroom that were struggling to read. Yeah, and I had shared all these like mini stories, like embarrassing moments from my childhood with kids to like get them to be motivated to do work. And since they liked those stories, I decided to write them all down before I forgot and decided for some reason to weave them all together and then just slapped it in my room. And kids loved it. And now 15 years later, here we are watching the book go out into the world. So I am super excited for Matt Sprouse and the Curse of the 10 Broken Toes. I actually have a copy to plug right there.
Yeah. We're going to plug that.
I'll plug it away. But yeah, I'm really excited to see the response from kids. I know just from it being in my classroom, it was successful, but to see it hopefully help other kids would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not a kid and I'm enjoying reading it.
Okay, good. That's a good start.
All right, are you ready to jump into your nerdy identity?
I am so ready.
What was the first thing that you were nerdy about?
So many things. It's probably a tie. Well, actually, the lead is probably Ninja Turtles, without a doubt.
Oh, yeah.
So I was a child of the 90s, and so Saturday morning cartoons, it was Ninja Turtles all the time. In fact, one of the opening scenes of the book is mostly autobiographical. So as you're reading it, about 85% of the stuff in there is based on a real event. So there's an opening scene where like Matt's like stabbing stuffed animals with a spoon and kicking them across the living room. That's what I used to do on Saturday mornings, like mimic all Ninja Turtle karate moves.
That's so funny. I was reading it earlier and I was like, I remember what you're talking about. And I was thinking, this feels very real.
I can't write anything other than real for the most part. We'll see how long I get to write, but everything's grounded in something that I did when I was younger. And so Ninja Turtle is definitely the first nerdy thing that I had everything of.
Oh yeah, you collected everything about it?
We did, yeah. I mean, I had all the action figures all lined up. In fact, I think when I moved to Minnesota from Colorado for college, a couple of years after that, my mom got rid of the whole collection. Didn't ask me permission, unfortunately. So they're just gone. I know, all those little Ninja Turtles. And then, after Ninja Turtles, I just went down a litany of different things. Like it was Legos for a while. Always read Calvin and Hobbes, which I feel like most people who identify as a nerd have experienced some sort of comic in their life, and that was the one for me.
What about your favorite nerdy thing?
As an adult or child, it doesn't matter.
Well, now I want to hear both.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll start. Probably, favorite nerdy thing growing up. I was really into Z-Bots. You might have to Google that. They were basically little action figures. They were not Transformers, but maybe like a ripoff or inspired by. But they were just little robots, and there was hundreds of them. And I really wanted to collect all of them, but they were all expensive, and you can never find the ones that you wanted. I had so many. In fact, I had so many that some traveled with me to Minnesota, and my kids play with them. Like we have a big bin of just like random collection of like McDonald's toys from the 90s, little action figures.
Ooh.
And I know, it's a treasure trove. And occasionally they'll pick them up and use them as fidgets or something. I'm like, I used to use that to blast, the bad guys. But it's cool to see them using them as well. As an adult, though, I feel like I'm more of a nerd than I was when I was a kid. So, I mean, you name it. I like to think I'm not like, I think most people, when they think of like a stereotypical nerd, it's like one thing you really intensely enjoy. And for me, it's not that I have one thing that's like high intense. I just have so many. For example, if I'm on YouTube and everyone's gone to bed for the night and just like me and I'm not tired, I'm looking up Avatar: The Last Airbender fight scenes and watching those, or going down. I love, like, they're called emulations, where it's like the character from Mario, but they make him do different things. Like Mario, if I don't know if it was like realistic Mario, but they're all done in 2-bit storylines.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they're really funny. More like if Mario was in Sonic the Hedgehog's world. Like, I watch stuff like that.
What about your current nerdy thing?
So I write all the time and illustrate, right? Like, that's my current job. And I didn't know, like, could I do that 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day? And it turns out I can't do it that much. It's too much creative output.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was like I was maxing out. I'd get real tired. So I was trying to think of, like, what could I do that I don't feel guilty about doing? I love video games, but if my wife came home from work and just saw me, like, playing video games, I'd feel guilty, because it doesn't look like work. So I was like, I'll just whittle wood. Like, people whittle stuff. There's like a local wood store. I went there. I'm like, I want to learn how to whittle. What do I need? And they like gave me stuff. So I brought one to show you.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Big reveal. So I had no idea what I would whittle, right? So you can buy like different widths of wood. It's really soft. And so I started making, someone called them macadamia nut people. And they're just like these little guys that I started carving with these little butts and little. I have a wood burner, so you just like burn the face into the wood.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and so I made this one and I put it on Instagram as a joke. I was like, hey, look at this little thing that I made, and people are like, where can I buy it? I'm like, are you guys serious? Like, but I've made some for my kids, and it's a nice way to wind down my day and also do something completely new and different. And I feel like that's a big thing about being a nerd too, is I think, like I said before, so many people think you are fixated on stuff, but really it's like just exploring different parts of yourself and learning what you enjoy. And I've enjoyed whittling little creatures, I guess.
I love that. How long did it take you to do that?
I think this was the first one. And so the first one, probably total time to carve the basic features, like probably 4 hours. I've gotten a lot faster.
Really? That seems pretty fast to me.
It is, but if you saw the shape, like the piece of wood was only a little bit thicker. So it wasn't like I carved it out of a tree trunk, and like saw the image before I carved it. But then I learned, you have to stain wood or else it'll over time get really nasty looking. So I had to investigate that and sand it. So yeah, probably total time for that one was 4 or 5 hours. And now my kids have requests. And so I have to pump them out much faster because every day they're poking me like, when's the next one done?
Do they all have little stories?
No, but you know what? Funny enough, I can't reveal yet, but they kind of look like a character in the third book that I'm writing.
Ooh.
The third book, Matt has to like collect all of these collectibles to save a farm, his neighbor's farm. And he's been told no one's ever collected all of these toys before, so he's going to try to be the first and sell them to get enough money to save the farm. And I think subconsciously, like, those look kind of like the character that I created for those little collectibles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but little storylines, I might need to like put a little sheet of paper with them when I hand them to my kids and be like, here's the background. Like, for like they do that with like Squishmallows and Beanie Babies, right? Like their personalities and stuff.
So are we getting some like insider secrets today?
I didn't sign an NDA, so I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Like,
No.
the general plot. The general plot's out there. Actually, I just sent Aaron the manuscript and all the illustrations. And so Aaron's job now will be to go back through, make sure that plot line is tight and moves quick enough. Aaron, if you're listening to this, can't wait for your feedback. I know it's coming. But yeah, that's an exciting part too, is to watch someone jump into your nerdy brain and be right there along with you. And that's been fascinating to watch someone like, what really impressed me about Erin is when we talk as if she wrote it with me. That's how I feel. It's like you are so in my brain that I just am, you are following my same train of thought, but picking up things that I missed. In my opinion, this third book that I wrote in the series is the best of the three because of the complexity of the plot and the little things that we put in there. So I'm really curious to see if I nailed it or if it was way confusing.
That's really exciting though. So that's so interesting, writing the third one as the first one is about to come out. or is out when this episode's released.
Yeah, it was bizarre. Even writing the second one, like I'd never written a sequel. I've created a world, right? Which is like, I think a lot of nerds' dream is like create this fantasy world where everyone lives or in your imagination. And so I have this world now. It's like, well, how do you introduce people to that world if they're only picking up the second book or just the third book and they haven't read the first one? Mm-hmm. And Erin's taught me a lot about that too. How can you quickly get readers involved in that whole narrative without having to have them read the first book? But it is weird to be working on things when nothing exists in the world yet. And so I'm looking forward to March 19th a lot.
So you said you like to play video games. Do you have a favorite video game?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to list all the consoles that I own, and they've been acquired over time. I had a Sega Game Gear was my first one. That's an old console. I had it when I was like 9 or 10. Had that for a long time until it pooped out on me. I have a Sega Genesis. I have a Nintendo 64. Those are all from high school. I have a Nintendo Switch, a Nintendo Wii, and a PS4. And even though I have all those things, I don't play video games every day. I don't have the time right now. But up until I signed my book deal, it was like a weekly thing where like in the evening when everyone went to bed, I'd play for like an hour. Zelda is by far my favorite. Mm-hmm. This might show my age. Video games are getting so like large in their worlds that they create that I can't keep up anymore. Do you play video games?
I don't, but I've had a few people on the show talk about their video games. My husband is a gamer, so I'm like familiar with the world, but I don't really play a lot.
Gotcha. What I had enjoyed before is like when you begin an adventure game, there's like a very clear start and end, and you're following just like one track the whole time. There's not really choices to make in those earlier adventure games. Whereas now Zelda's like, here's an entire map. You can go wherever you want from the beginning. And it's like, that's so many choices. It's overwhelming. I was keeping a journal of the things that I needed to do.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I have a neighbor too who plays the exact same games. And sometimes we just are at the fence and I was like, I played a game for an hour, but I couldn't even tell you what I did. I was like walking around for an hour virtually.
It's funny. I say that I don't really play games, but there is one game that I've played my entire life. They've stopped making new ones. It's actually the Nancy Drew computer games. I don't know. It's such a small little like community. Yeah, they were so fun.
What? I'm going to have to go relook that up. Was that in like the same era of backyard baseball? Do you remember that? That was another one that just, I'm going to have to go look up Nancy Drew. What do? Are you like, is it third person?
It was kind of like point and click, and there was a plot, and like you would have to explore all the little objects and little games and tasks. It was cool. I actually learned a few things from playing those games.
Yeah, educational video games.
Yeah.
That's awesome. My kids play with me too, but they have since found their own routes. Like they like the dancing games and stuff like that. Or Mario Party is another one that we get to do as a family. Video games are still involved.
What is the most underrated nerdy thing about you?
Oh, underrated. That's a really good question. I don't know that I had an answer for that when I was previewing the questions. Maybe the underrated thing is that I think most things that I was interested in as a child, I still have an interest in, and I've acquired new ones. And so maybe that's the underrated thing is you might look at me now and be like, oh, Matt whittles. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm still like, if you showed me a Ninja Turtle comic, I would read through it. I think what's underrated about me is I just have a very wide net that I cast over things. And I think that's what made me an effective teacher when I was in the classroom is any kid could come up to me and be like, oh, I was watching this thing. I'm like, cool, tell me more about it. Because like I legitimately wanted to know more. And you can't fake that in front of kids. Like they pick up on whether you're faking your attitude or not real quick. And so being exposed to all those things, like I remember the first time I'd never watched anime growing up, really. Like I knew of Dragon Ball Z, which I don't know if that's considered anime, right? Is it?
I think it is.
Maybe?
Yeah.
I think it is. Yeah. I remember when I came to college, I had a couple kids on the floor who were really into it. And I was like, what is this that you're watching? And I just kind of fell in love with what other people were falling in love with. It's like, if there's an audience for this, it must be good, right? So there's something in there for me to appreciate too. Even if I don't go all in, I bet there'll be an aspect of it that I like.
So that curiosity and wanting to learn about what other people are interested in as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good approach just to life in general, that even if it's not a wide audience, right? But if there's a group of people who really like something, there's got to be something in there for you too, or at least appreciate what they love about it. And that's a lot of art forms as well. what I appreciate too is not just that other people love it. I appreciate the work that has gone into that, whatever it may be. So as an author now, which I can call myself on March 19th, I really appreciate the amount of work, emotional toll, creative juices that it took to push out that product, whatever it is. And so I kind of look at it from that lens too of, wow, to illustrate that must have taken you a ton of time, right? Or to create that music, like, man, you must have been listening to yourself for a long time to create that new line. To answer your original question, looking at different things with a different lens.
I'm so excited to talk a little bit more about your journey. But before we get into that, what is the most random nerdy thing about you?
Random nerdy thing. So my kids will come home with books. And what's odd about me is I don't read that much right now because I'm nervous that subconsciously I'll steal someone's idea and put it in a book. So I don't read. I just don't read. But occasionally my kids will come home with a graphic novel that I haven't seen before. And even though it's meant, both my kids are pretty young, I will open that book and I'll be laughing right alongside them. And I think that it just really makes me feel like a kid when I open up just a silly book and find something in there that my inner child appreciates more than my adult self. Like, I don't think younger Matt Eicheldinger would look at a graphic novel for young readers the same way that adult Matt would. And I know it sounds weird, but there's just something about it where I feel like I'm sharing something with my kids. I'm not just saying, oh, I like the book, and then I walk away like we are bonding over this moment of laughter. There's a series called Catwad. It's just these two cats. One of them's super grumpy. One of them, I can say this because he calls himself that, he's an idiot. And the way they play off each other within like 4 or 5 panels, I think is just masterfully done. So I get excited when things like that come home.
So it seems like you're also a huge fan of comedy.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny, like when I started social media in 2021, I joined TikTok to like understand what my students were getting into. And then I started making what I thought was funny content. And then it exposes you to a world of so many comedians and so many different types of comedy. And I was doing a very like specific, I was poking fun at myself, but I do like to laugh. I love stand-up comedy, but I think it all stems back to the same type of humor, which comes from Calvin and Hobbes. I mean, I think most things that I do currently, you could trace back somehow to those original comic strips, which is so surreal to me to be under that same publisher, because I'm sure so many artists say that because I know he's been such a huge influence on so many writers. But it really is surreal to be like, wow, I don't know that you understand, Bill. I read your comic every night for like a decade in my bed with the sheets up and a flashlight. And so to be able to think of Calvin and Hobbes as I'm writing, not that I'm trying to copy that humor, but it's a bar that you're trying to hit. Right? You're like, if I can just be close to what I think great is, that'd be good enough. And I think what he created was just phenomenal.
Wow, that's such a cool origin story.
Sure. Well, origin story.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think back to, I still have all the exact same comics, like booger stained and all. They're in our basement. They're on a shelf. And my kids have read them. Didn't have quite the same connection, but what's good is there are books like that out there for my kids to connect with. And that one was unique for me. But yeah, to be under the same publisher, unreal.
Yeah, it sounds unreal. I would be freaking out. Like that's so cool. That must have been really emotional for you when that first happened.
Oh, it was. So the way it works for people who are not in publishing is your agent in traditional publishing will take your little baby of a book or project and submit it to a variety of different publishers. And so mine got sent to Aaron, and then Aaron wanted to have a phone call just to meet me, hear more about the projects. And I think our meeting was like an hour and a half, and it's more of like a meet and greet to learn what you might project you want to do with your series. I was fighting back tears the whole time. Aww. The moment Aaron and I ended the phone call, I just like sobbed because it sounded like a deal was coming. And I sent this to Aaron later, but I immediately went to my iPad and I drew a picture of my Matt Sprouts character running behind Calvin and Hobbes saying like, I get to come with you guys. Like, so it was very emotional. That character I've been drawing since I was like in 4th grade. So it was like it was like my artistic way to be like, hey, little Matt Sprouts, you made it. Like you're with the big guys.
I have the chills. That's so beautiful.
Oh, thanks. And you know, it doesn't seem in the moment, I'm not thinking of like, I'm going to show this picture to other people.
Right.
or like I'm going to plaster this on social media. It really just is like my genuine response of that moment, besides crying, which I'm a fairly big crier. If you watch any of my social media videos, like I cry occasionally. But yeah, that was a very powerful moment, just to be like 15 years of working on the same project, but backtrack that even 15 more years to how long I've been drawing the same character. It was the only way I could think of to like appreciate the moment other than crying.
And now the world gets to see him.
That's bizarre to say, the world. But yeah, I mean, now that a book is with a major publisher, I like to say it has the potential to reach so many people. And that alone is weird, because I actually produced my book by myself first. I made an independent version. And what was cool about that is I could track wherever it was going. I knew every purchase. I knew if someone heard it from someone else, because I was so involved in the process. And now when I get an email from like early readers of the book, they're like, I read your book and I'm from Indiana. I'm like, I have no idea who you are. That's so crazy that you don't know me and I don't know you, but you read my book. It's a weird experience, but a cool one.
Yeah. So speaking of reaching people, I was looking at your TikTok and I love your stories. Some of them are just so emotional, so meaningful, and then some of them are so funny. And I love the connection that you have with your students. So,
oh, thank you.
What was it like for you to go viral?
Kind of bizarre. Well, to backtrack, do you go to TikTok to watch me or Instagram? I'm just curious.
No, when I first learned about you, I went to TikTok, but I also follow you on Instagram.
Oh, okay. Because I don't post to TikTok nearly as much anymore. So like when people find me on TikTok, I'm always surprised. If I make 10 videos, I only post like 1 or 2 there. Unfortunately, the hate for teachers is pretty strong on TikTok. And so even though I'm telling uplifting stories, I would get messages that are just like, I hope you're okay, like the person writing this message, because if you're attacking me with that after hearing like a positive story, I don't know what to do. And so I don't post there nearly as often. But going viral, to answer your question, is bizarre, but I did have experience with it with TikTok. I had this weird video of me swirling water. Did you happen to see that one?
I did. I went all the way back.
You went deep. Oh man, you went real deep.
I love to research.
So at the time when I made that swirling water video, which was a freak accident, as most viral videos are, like my wife started recording, I didn't know. I had, I think at the time, maybe 1,000 followers, and that video was like 15 million, and it shot me up to like 8,000 followers. So then I was like, do I replicate this? Like, how do I accumulate more? And burnt out real quick trying to like swirl water and do things like that. And so when I started telling stories on Instagram and the first video went viral, which was literally the first day that I wasn't teaching. It was the first day of me being an author, as I told my first video, and it went viral. You know, my followers count spiked up, and I was like, well, that was cool. And I just decided like, I'm not chasing this high again. I did that a couple years ago. Doesn't amount to much. Wasn't very self-fulfilling. And also I didn't have much content to like capture that audience. And so I waited a few days, and I was like, I'll tell another story that I've saved from teaching. And that one went viral. And I was like, that's probably just a coincidence. It was like the next 6 or 7 videos that I told all were above 1 million views or close to it. Wow. And so I went from 50 followers to like, I think it peaked within 3 weeks at like 250,000. And then it's just been kind of like a slow trickle ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think what has happened is I found a niche.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not the first storyteller. There are some phenomenal storytellers on social media, not just because I'm telling stories about students, but I think the way in which I tell the story is somewhat new. That's my best analysis. But I still really don't know why that one took off.
I know, it's so interesting. That's really sad about all of that hate that you received and teachers are receiving on TikTok. That's awful.
Yeah. And I've got theories about that too. Teachers in general have been trying to be heard for so long about we need more resources and we are struggling. Oh, yeah. Not just like the classic teachers are underpaid. I'm talking more than that, like all the things that teachers need. When social media came around, especially TikTok, all these teachers were able to show and talk about what they're struggling with. And that's great. We need that. But I wonder if what is then perceived by society is teachers are only complaining, which again, they do have the right to do. And I think it's very valid, the things that teachers are saying that they need. But then if that's all that people are seeing, I think it starts just to become white noise. So I think something that my videos, I hope, are doing are injecting some real life examples of what teachers do. of like, this is what happened. And it's not a story about me. This is a story about just like what happened. And you can take from it what you want. And again, I want to stress there's nothing wrong with teacher humor and there's nothing wrong with saying what you're struggling with. I just wonder if there are more videos that showcased what we did, if that might be helpful. Make sense?
Oh, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know though. TikTok for a while was super positive, like the videos that I was putting there. And then for some reason, and I think most TikTok creators have seen this, the view count just went way down, just like all of a sudden plummeted. So I was getting on average probably, I have 90-ish thousand followers on TikTok, and I would get about half of that for views each video. So like 45,000 views. And now it's like on a good day above 1,000. And I've seen people who have millions of followers who have the same struggles. Like, wow. I have 2 million followers and this video was viewed like 800 times. And wow. I don't know why that is, but I think since there's not as many people viewing it, the hurtful comments sting more because they're not overridden with good.
Oh, so. Yeah, definitely. You know, I'm really glad that you're sharing this because this podcast is a little bit newer. I'm definitely new on social media. And I'm always like, ooh, is this going to be the clip that goes viral? And I'm like, Morgan, no, don't think like that. And then I'm like living my life and I was like, ooh, should I take a video of this for social media? Like it could become very addicting.
Yes. If my wife were sitting right here, she could give you all the examples of me trying to capture that swirling TikTok video high. It consumed my whole day. It consumed my whole day because I was trying to use it to sell my book, but it didn't match because why would you want to buy a book from a guy swirling water? Like they didn't mold. And so a lot of times when people have reached out to me and they're like, I want to share stories or I want to grow my following. Like, what do I do? And my best advice is you need to be genuine in what it is you're talking about or doing. And you need to do something that's repeatable that you love to do. You love to do. And so like recording a story for me, and I've gotten faster, but right now, if I were to tell a story from the time I write the story to the time I hit publish on Instagram, it's probably 20 to 25 minutes, as opposed to before it was hours thinking, hours writing, pre-me telling stories on Instagram. And so that becomes stressful, right? Because then you do all that work and then you get barely anything in return. And if you are doing something you love that's repeatable, then it doesn't matter. Because you're just doing what you love and you're giving people an insight, not necessarily into your craft, but who you are. And I think that's what makes the connection on social media is I have people who are not teachers that watch me, but I think they've invested in, it sounds so corny, but they've invested in who I am more than the product that I'm pushing. And I don't talk about my book really at all, because another thing I don't like about social media is it's just like, I do this, like buy my thing. Hey, you, like I've got this thing to buy. If that is your motivator for going on social media, it's not going to go well for you. It's just not.
Totally.
Like, it's just not, because people get that all throughout their day. So they don't want to come to your page and see you just selling stuff, I think.
I agree.
Who knows?
Were students finding your accounts and watching your videos? What was that like?
Yes. Well, I would say there's been two versions of that. So while I was teaching, and I've only been not teaching for like 7 months, that's when I was only doing TikTok and I was doing like teacher humor, and kids found me. They knew I was doing it. They just all wanted to ride on the coattails of fame, which I didn't have a lot of fame, but like, I would get like some free products sent to me. The funnest one was like,
ooh.
Yeah, I complained about how as a teacher, like sometimes you have a planning period and your whole planning period is sucked up because you can't get the staple out of the stapler. So I did a video on that. Didn't tag a company in it, but someone from corporate Staples saw it and they sent me a giant box of school supplies. And so to like bring that in and like put it in class, and then kids are like, I saw that Staples like tagged you in their account. What'd you get? Like, that's cool. But I was always very upfront about like, hey, I want you to all understand I'm not making money from social media. I don't make money. And they had a lot of questions about that. They're like, well, I thought if you had 100,000 followers, you got paid this much. And I'm like, the swirling TikTok video that I made, if I would have been a part of the creator fund, that video of 15 million would have made me like a couple $100. That's it.
Wow.
That's it. And so like that shattered their little minds of like, oh, it's not I was perceiving this differently as a student. So that was when I was a teacher. Now it's so fun because I tell these stories, and even though I change names to protect student privacy and I tell stories that are older, just because my account has grown, kids are finding me. And they're adults now, which is so weird.
Wow.
So the funnest one was, so my first year teaching was 2009. So those kids are out of college now, if they went to college, or they're like 23, 24. And I had a kid send me a picture of her husband, and their little baby. And she's like, you came up on my For You page, and I just wanted to let you know this is what I'm doing. Here's my lovely family. And of course, I bawled. I was like, that's it. I can't continue. That's so much love in a single picture. And, as teachers, we rarely, I think pre-social media, you rarely got to see your students once they left your classroom, unless you were maybe from a super small town and they came back. Like, you just don't get to see the longevity of the work that you put into helping a human grow. And so to get these messages coming in every once in a while, it's really, really helpful as a teacher to know that you had an impact in some way.
So I know you taught 6th grade.
That's all I've taught.
Yeah. What subject was it?
I taught language arts, which is reading and writing combined.
That was my favorite class.
Oh, good. It was my favorite class. And what I love about middle school, specifically 6th grade, is there's still some elementary holding to it, right? Like, we're all new to this building and you still need assistance, like doing things that are responsible, because you might not have that much responsibility at home. But the writing part of 6th grade is what I love, because their imaginations for the most part are still wide open. And you just get a really long list of different ideas every single day, which is cool.
So I know we spoke a bit about your journey in social media, and there's so many different directions I want to go. I'm like curious about your writing journey and, where you started there, and then how you also got an agent, because I imagine that process is pretty stressful too.
So to start, like, how did I get started as a writer? First off, I have no background in writing. I went to college to become a teacher. That's it. Didn't keep journals. I didn't write in my spare time. I don't even remember in college if I told good stories to my friends or not. It just wasn't a part of my life. I ran track in college, did my work, went on dates with my now wife, and that was college. And then my first year in my classroom, I had all these colleagues who had unique things that they did in their room to motivate kids. I didn't have one at all. And I shouldn't say most, but a lot of my colleagues were handing out candy to kids to do stuff. And it's like, I'm making no money. I can't afford to feed kids candy all day, every day for the entire year. I couldn't even tell you why I started, but I just told an embarrassing story from my childhood, and they ate it up, just gobble it up. And I was like, well, maybe that's my thing. Maybe if we finish a task early, or if we all accomplish a goal, Mr. Eich will share another embarrassing story from his childhood. And it just took off. Our 6th grade had, at the time, probably 400 kids. It's now grown to 600. And so the word would spread about Mr. Eich's story. So then I would get invited to go do stories with other teams, during a common time. And so I was like, well, before I get super old, I should probably write these stories down before I forget. And so I went home, started writing these stories, and I couldn't even tell you, I really don't understand why I did it, but I just connected them all with a plot line and printed it off and put it in my room. It was called 10 Broken Toes at the time. If kids wouldn't read what I had in class, I'm like, well, what about that horribly printed stack of stories that your teacher tells you? You want to read that? Oh yeah, I'll read that. Okay. And so that was the motivator for me to get the book on a shelf. It was that, and I thought it'd be cool to put a book on a shelf, just to see it there and say that you did it. Why not? I wasn't thinking of how much does that cost or anything like that. It was just, that seems cool. And so I started doing the traditional route of querying agents, which I'm sure my letters were horrendous.
I can't imagine that process and the anxiety that goes into that.
Yeah, but I think what's nice about having no background in writing is you just don't know. I didn't know how hard it would be. I didn't know the statistics. I didn't know anything. And so I would just send these emails and then months later get a rejection. You're like, that's okay. I'll just keep going. I did that keep going thing for over a decade. What motivated me was I knew the story was working. So I figured it was just a matter of time. But even when you have good evidence in front of you, you can still burn out. After a decade of rejections, I just decided to do it myself as my last shot. This is going to be my final push for this dream, and we'll see. I was lucky enough to where I did pay to publish. The part that was lucky is we did a fundraising campaign. And so I had people buy the book before it existed.
That's wonderful.
It was.
Yeah.
And I figured if this is my dream, this is my one ask of the world. This is my one ask. I'm going to ask one time for you to buy something. I'm not going to ask people for money. And so I raised more money than we expected. And we were able to produce over 2,000 copies of my book. I knew nothing of publishing. I learned a ton in the process. I ended up illustrating just like the cover and some spot art, and then sold that book for 2 years. And I won, I think, 4 international awards for indie books, which was incredible. But I still couldn't get into stores. So I was mostly selling the book through my own website, which means if you bought a book, I shoved it in an envelope, sealed it, brought it to the post office, waited in line. And if it's laughable until you have a video that spikes and you get 500 orders. Ooh. And then you're like, ooh, I have 500 books to put in an envelope and stand at the post office and make them really angry with me.
yeah, I bet.
Yeah, because to send a book media mail, which is the cheapest way, you can't print labels yourself. You have to have them do it. And so I would buy coffee for the workers at the post office, and they would open up early. And I would just stand there for 2 or 3 hours while they inputted every address, asked me if it was correct. I hit okay. And then we did the next book.
Oh my gosh, I never would have known that.
Yeah. And so I did have a distributor through Amazon. But the thing about Amazon is they would see if I got a lot of clicks, they would order 500 books. And then my distributor would be like, they're not going to sell that many. We're going to send them 100 because I pay for that shipping. And then when Amazon sends them back, I also pay for that shipping. And so I was losing money at the same time. Being an independent publisher, it's really hard to make money. I'd be very upfront. It's very hard to make money to live off of, let alone print more copies. And so when we came to that point, I had 30 books left. And I still I had sales numbers. I had TikTok had grown quite a bit. And I was it seemed like this is not meant to be. So my final thing is I need advice from someone who's not friends and family, because all my friends and family were so great through this whole time of you can do it. We'll buy the book before it exists, pat on the back. But I needed this a realist to be this book is horrible, or what, someone to tell me to stop or to keep going. And so I ended up paying for a consultation through a writing resource center. And my agent, Danny Siegelbaum, was one of them. And so Danny met with me and she's like, what do you need? I'm like, I need you to tell me to pursue my dream or to quit, really. And so could you help me with that? And she's like, I really just look at query letters, and give advice, but sure, why don't you send me your manuscript, send me your statistics, and I'll get back to you. And she called me the next day and offered representation. She's like, I normally don't do this. I read your whole book in the night, and I think we're going to sell this soon. And I signed with Danny that week. And then within 2 weeks, we had an offer from Aaron. So it was
wow, that's crazy.
It was. And it was hard to understand because it was 15 years into a 2-week period. And, for those of you who are not involved in the publishing world, when you sign a book deal, you're not quitting your job and riding away in your new luxury vehicle. You have what I think is an opportunity. And there are people who get substantial advances for their books, and I'm happy with mine. But it's still, my wife and I had to decide what to do with that, because now I'm here. So now do you continue teaching? Do you go all in with your book? And we decided to take a year off from me teaching. And financially, that's 50% of our income gone. And then Instagram happened. And because of the stories I tell and the early success of the pre-orders, Aaron and I were able to talk about other projects and work out other deals to where I can continue writing for another year. And so we're still in potential land, Slingshot's being pulled back. We don't know what's going to happen, but all signs are pointing to some really amazing things for a debut author, which I still can't quite wrap my brain around. Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. There's so many parts of your story that I want to address. So congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And, as much as that story a lot, what I like to remind people is that story does sound like me grinding away for 15 years in a dream. But so much of my story is people around me giving me support, and not financially. I'm talking just the little nuggets that I needed. My wife especially. And she's really good too about not giving me false hope. She's pretty real about things. If I was feeling down that day, she'd be like, well, do you want to give up? And I'd be like, I don't know. She goes, well, it sounds like you need to think about that. Just not giving me a way out, but just being very real with me. Those are the things that kept me going too. Yeah. Bizarre to think about though. for all that time.
Yeah. One thing that really stuck out to me about your story is that this wasn't something you were doing your whole life. And I think it could give some inspiration to people who might feel like, well, I'm too old to do this. It's too late. I needed to have started really young in order to be successful.
Yeah, I've talked about this with a few people. I think what's great about starting something new is, like I said before, is there's nothing you can't compare yourself to someone who's been doing it for 15 years, right? So let's say you want to start carving wood, right? I'm not going to go on Instagram and look at the most amazing carvings and think that I can do that right now. I can't do that right now. But what's cool about starting any sort of passion is you're going to put your own twist on it, right? You're going to do your own unique thing to it that no one else has done before. If you just dedicate some time to going through the pains of starting something new. For me in writing, the pains were figuring out the process of getting an agent. That was really hard for me, right? For someone who's maybe starting pottery, it's like, oh, my clay collapses every time I start. Well, you're going to learn how to fix that, and you're going to learn to do something unique with that spinning vase that no one's done before. You just need to give it time. And so that's something that I think about often when I sit and I have to create a new book cover or I've got to create a new character. Starting from scratch can be intimidating, but it's also amazing because there's nothing to compare it to. You've never done it before.
Would you want to go back to teaching, or would you want to focus on this full time?
Here's what I'll say about teaching. I was definitely burning out, and I was burning out really fast, and it was taking a toll in how I came home for the day. And I think that depending on where you teach, that can be easier or harder. And I'll be upfront in that the places that I've taught have been, I think, easier than many teachers experience. I had great resources. I taught with, friends. I grew up teaching with them. But even in that best case environment, it was still really hard. And so when I think about going back to teaching, I would be happy to go back into a classroom. However, there would be a lot of things that I need to change about how I approach education so that I come home my best self. Because my kids weren't getting the best of me. They were getting a dad who comes home and is thinking about what I have to do tomorrow in order for my day not to be miserable, right? Because the thing about teaching is if I don't plan what I'm doing tomorrow, we have nothing to do. And so it becomes, we call it the Sunday scaries in teaching, is Sunday night. If I don't have a plan for Monday or Tuesday, it's going to not only affect my students, my day will be miserable. It'll be absolutely miserable. For those of you who haven't tried to spontaneously do something with 30 kids in a classroom, it's really hard to come up with a plan. And so that's what would need to change. What I'm excited for now is that I get to pursue something that has been such a driving factor in how I approach education, which is reading. And I get to play a different role in that. Something that I got to do and have gotten to do already before my book release is I've been able to go into a lot of areas in the United States that don't have great resources. That seems to be something new motivating me, is like, well, I wonder, could I get to a point in my career as an author to where I could start doing that stuff for free? That would be a great way to go into these small rural communities or urban or wherever it might be where kids don't have the resources or parents to bring in an author to talk. Would be incredible. I remember the first school visit I did for my independent book was in a small town in Minnesota, and I was so excited just to do it. And nobody knew anything of me. I just had happened to have a college friend who taught there, and those kids looked at me as if I had ridden a limousine into their small town. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you're an author? Tell us." And it was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys don't get exposed to this kind of thing." And so that's what I hope right now is I would return to teaching, but I would love to tell stories as long as I can. That's my current goal, is how can I make this a part of my life for as long as I can?
Being a storyteller.
Being a storyteller specifically.
Yeah.
I've also have a desire, if I go back into teaching, I would like to do something in higher ed. I would like to teach other teachers. That's always been something I've wanted to do. And so I think, to answer your original question, going back into teaching, I will always be a teacher in some form. I just don't know what it's going to look like yet.
What is it like for you now to be able to pursue something that's so creative? Like, I know you said you can't do it for that long during the day because you max out. So what is that like?
Oh, it's like, I told my wife, it's like rediscovering who I am all over again, because you have an identity when you get connected to a job for so long, right? So I introduce my videos as, hello, I'm Matt, I'm a teacher. And it's like, I sit at home every day by myself. Who am I? what is my creative? I've never had the ability to really like dissect my own creative process because it was always done second or third or fourth in my day. So to have the time and space to write and then think about my own writing or think about the way I approach my writing is so cool to me. And even to watch myself progress. And that's the other thing too, you know, when you start something new, there's this period of time at the beginning where you get really good really quick. So like carving, I got really good at one technique really quick. I couldn't like get this little butt to go. I learned how to do it. And now it's opened up all these other different possibilities for different techniques. And that's the same thing with me illustrating. Like I'd never drawn on an iPad until I got my book deal. And I've only been drawing on it for 6 months. And I just feel so substantially better at what I'm producing. So much so that like I said, I'll never create a graphic novel. That's so intimidating to draw that much. And now I'm like, I have a pitch ready. Like I'm ready to make a graphic. And so like that excites me. It's like I'm growing as an artist in a way that I didn't think I would have the time to ever do. Also learning though that I have and I don't know if this is because I don't have kids asking me questions every 5 seconds. I have a short attention span. I fight it. I have to fight it. Not so much when I'm writing. When I'm writing, I lose track of where I am and what time it is, and I'm all immersed in the world I'm creating. Everything else during my day, like responding to emails, even illustrating, I have to like set a timer, can't look at my phone for an hour, don't stand up. And so that too has been interesting. It's like, it hasn't all been joyful. I need to hold myself accountable. And it turns out I'm not really good at doing that all the time.
How has pursuing a passion like this just changed who you are and like the energy maybe you feel or you bring to the people around you?
Again, everyone's journey is different. I'm a better father right now than I was last year, without a doubt. And that's hard for me to say, but it's also encouraging to know that I can go back to who I was. And it's not like I was coming home like massaging my temples and like angry at the world, but it is noticeably different in the brain space that I have for my family. And so, like I said, if I go back to what I was doing before in the classroom, I would be fine with it, but I would really need to set some new parameters for myself to where I can not bring it home with me. And that would be the biggest challenge of returning to the classroom. It's never been the kids. It's never been colleagues or admin. For me, it's always been, what am I bringing home and what can I leave at school?
We talk a lot about fandoms on the show and communities. I'm wondering if you formed any sort of like author community.
I'm trying, and people have been really generous in their time. Someone that I reached out to pretty early on, actually before I had my book deal, is an author named Nina Hamza, and she is with Scholastic, and she is local to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Her book was a finalist for Minnesota Book of the Year. And I was just looking to learn anything about her journey, her writing. It's like anything that I could learn. And I did this often. I remember Erin said this too when she was on your podcast, which I listened to. She would just cold email people. You're welcome. I do my research too. She talked about how she would just send emails, and the worst that you're going to hear is no. And so I have done that in my career as well. And so Nina was generous enough to meet with me. I got to buy her a coffee, and she was just an open book, told me all about her journey as an author, her struggles, even like her advance amounts for her book, just like completely open and transparent. And even though hearing some of the things were hard, because I was getting more of a sense of how difficult it would be to break into the industry, it was also a motivator to understand like, oh, you are a normal human being and you did the same thing that I did. You were working in your spare time and you made it. I think I could make it. And so that was actually like one of the first people of my little writing group. She created a book blurb for my second book. She has just been absolutely phenomenal. And I've been slowly meeting other people within the same publishing house as me. But I really am trying to meet more local people just to hear their experience and what they do. What is tough is finding full-time authors. They're few and far between. And I'm a full-time author because it was a risk we are willing to take. And we are hopeful that it's going to pay off. But for many authors, it's I'm an author and I'm also this. Or they're an author, but they travel all the time to do visits. I'm trying just to learn as much about what other people do to try and figure out what does my path look like moving forward. And for those of you listening, it doesn't hurt just to email somebody. When I wrote my original book, I emailed the Minnesota Author of the Year. I can't remember his last name. His name was Mark. I emailed him like, hey, my name's 21-year-old Matt. Would you be willing to read my book? Which I don't even think I edited. I think that's how new it was. And he was like, absolutely. And he read the first 3 chapters of my book, marked it up, gave me some nice notes, and went on his way. And I just thought like, wow, that's incredible. And so I've tried to do that too as people have reached out, depending on how much time I have. What can I give back that was given to me? I hope this is a weird dynamic, but I hope my books become so popular that I'm really busy, right?
Me too. They will. I'm confident.
Yes, thank you. But I also don't want to become too busy to where I can't find time to do what was given to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think you're going into it with such a clear intention and understanding of what your values are that I think it seems like you'll really be able to hold on to that.
I hope so. And I'm lucky enough to where I'm surrounded by people to help keep me grounded in the moment, right? And so the way that I treat this opportunity of writing books is that it'll go away. Because I feel like if I treat it that way, then I get to really enjoy what I'm doing as if it's going to be over. It's given me a perspective too of how I look at independent businesses too. Like I had to start an LLC company, just to get my paychecks, but also to do the other things on my website, and just to like have an appreciation for what people have to go through when they're starting a whole business, right? On their own. Those groups of people have my utmost respect. You're taking a risk, you're believing in yourself, you're putting literally everything on the line and just grinding away to make your dream come true. Having done a smidget of that with my independent book, I can't get over how hard people work to make things happen.
I know. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into the process that people might not realize.
Yeah. I mean, people, when they see like a new storefront, they're like, oh, a person opened a store. Is like, man, I think cutting the ribbon was the easy part.
Definitely. How would somebody know if the Matt Sprouts series is right for them?
That's a great question. I have never been asked that question. I'll tell you my intent when I created the book. I wanted it to be a place where kids could fully immerse themselves in a new but realistic world. I want them to be like, oh, that could happen to me, right? And have enough mystery to where it seems plausible. When I signed my deal with Andrews McMeel, Aaron said, would you be willing to draw 100 pictures for this? Which is funny because I told my wife at the time, like, if they ask me to draw, I'm going to have to say no because that's too intimidating. And then as soon as Aaron asked, I was like, oh, absolutely. I'll do whatever you want.
Yes, I'll do anything.
Yeah. And so now that those illustrations are in there, I like to tell people that the book can be for any reader, but I hope it's for kids who are a little intimidated by reading their first full-length novel and have been not stuck, but only reading graphic novels, because they should understand that there's a whole list of books that are going to be so immersive for you to experience, whether it's mine or someone else's. And I hope my book is a bridge to that. Because as you flip through it, there are illustrations. They're like every 2 or 3 pages. But I really want your imagination to be creating characters. Here's a good example. So there's one character in my book, the purple grape lady, Miss Klinkle. She's a reoccurring character. I refuse to draw her. I will not draw her because she is such a dynamic character that I want readers to have their own imagination of what that looks like for them. And if you were to pick up my book, I hope, number one, it sparks your imagination. I hope you're thinking about that world a lot. Number two, though, is I've started to embed in more of the books in the series as well, lessons. Not explicit, like Matt Sprouts doesn't go like, it's not okay to lie. But the lessons that I show, I think, come up in a way that is natural for that character through making mistakes and realizing. So as kids read, I hope they realize like, oh, I've done that too. And that wasn't probably the best, but that character found a way to fix it. I could probably change or fix what I did. That's my other hope.
Becoming a storyteller and an author, and I know you really spoke about this, we've spoken about this a lot, but how has it changed your life?
You have some amazing questions. I hope you get to keep doing this for a while.
Oh my God, I would love to. That's the best compliment, by the way. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And they're on the fly too. That's what's impressive is you're not reading a list. You're just like, these are on top of your head. How has it changed my life? I think particularly we'll start with Instagram. That's what allows me to write every day. So what I do is I have a box filled with all these little snippets of stories. I didn't keep long form journals. They're just like small sentences, enough for me to remember. But what I have to do with that story is I script it out first. I write it full length, whatever it is. And that usually ends up being 2-3 pages sometimes. But with Instagram, I only get 90 seconds. And so I have to whittle this story down to less than a page, and it forces me to get at the heart of the story. And for me, what's changed in my life the most is I'm viewing a lot of these stories differently than I did before. And when you take a new lens on and you're practicing with that new lens every day, then you start to see things currently differently.
Oh.
So like if I'm looking at a story, and this is one that's in a future book, because I have all these stories coming out in a book as well in October. But there's a story of me like I'm hunting around my classroom because something smells really bad. It smells horrible. And I don't know if you've ever tried to discreetly smell 30 different kids. It's like really hard to do. And because someone stinks, and what you don't want is that kid to be identified, and then it becomes a problem because everyone's like, oh, so-and-so stinks. And it can happen just like that, and then it's out of your control. So I'm trying to identify the smell. And then the kids start smelling. They're like, Mr. Reich, do you smell that? Oh, it's so hard. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, this is going to be another disaster. But they all left for their next class. And then I was getting ready for my prep, and I was like, it still smells. And then I looked at the bottom of my shoe. It's a huge pile of poop.
I was waiting.
Yeah. And, like in that moment, it was like, it's hardy har, like, oh, take a look at yourself. But, when I look at that story and I want to share it with people, there's a lesson in there. Maybe the first people we don't look at as others. Maybe you got to look at yourself first.
I love
right?
that.
Maybe you've got the poo on you. And so that's kind of how I am approaching or trying to approach things in real time. So when my kids come home, what am I hearing? What am I learning from them? And what is the missing narrative here that I'm not picking up on? And I think that's good for everybody, right? And if I were to like sum up what I'm saying in one phrase, it would be, I have slowed down. I've just slowed down. And it's allowing me to, I'm not having everyday epiphanies. I don't want to put myself up on a pedestal of like, I'm seeing something you are all not, but it's new for me. It's new for me. And I'm really appreciating that part of what storytelling has created is I'm seeing narratives that I didn't before. And they are, I think, helping me as a person and hopefully helping my own kids as well. And hopefully people who watch online too.
Yeah, so you're really staying in the moment and seeing everything for what it is instead of just always thinking about the next thing. And you're taking that time to reflect inward.
I'm trying. Yeah, I'm trying my best. And it's cool too, because what's unique about storytelling is when I tell a story, what I try to do is share what I found in that story. And then on social media, when I read through comments, it's like, oh, someone found something new in that story that they thought of. And that's what's cool about storytelling, and probably one of the reasons why it's one of the, oldest forms of communication, right, of lessons, is that everyone pulls something different from a story. We don't all have to have the same lesson. And that's really cool to see too, is to hear people say like, well, Matt, did you think about this? And it's like, that probably should have been what I led with in the story. So that's unique too, is watching other people find how they're connecting with that.
What has been the most surprising part of becoming an author that maybe you never would have thought of before?
Ooh, that's another fabulous question. As a teacher, you are aware of so many different cultures and so many different backgrounds, and you take those into consideration as you teach. But I'm not necessarily always creating those things. So as my classroom became more diversified over the last 10 years, we would go look for things to help that need, but I wasn't creating. And so now I'm on the creation side of it. And as I look at my characters and I look at where they are and who they interact with, I am now thinking about, okay, who is picking up my book and how might they view it from their lens? And I think that's making me a stronger storyteller. And I've said this a couple times, if I were to redo what's happened in the last 6 months, I think I would edit more of the first book that you read. I think there are things in there that I would change. Not that it would capture a wider audience, but I think there are things that I could have done that would have immersed even more readers into the book. And I'm not saying that from a marketing perspective. I'm saying that from a child reading perspective. I think that it would make the book just better. And I'm sure most artists say that, right? Like, what's the phrase in writing? When you think you're done, you've just begun. And right. But as I continue to write and I create new stories or think about future projects, I'm now thinking of it in a different lens from being a teacher. I'm thinking about it from the creation point of it. And that's still so new to me. It's so new. It's 6 or 7 months new. I've just really enjoyed watching myself open up to different possibilities of what I think it is to be an author and what it could mean to continue being a storyteller. Because I don't see myself as, I love Matt Sprouts. Matt Sprouts will have an end. I have a 3-book deal right now. I'm hopeful that the series will continue, but I don't believe it to be something like a Diary of a Wimpy Kid or a Dog Man, where they're like, just keep coming out. I have other things in mind that I want to do and that I think will be really fun to work on from a creative standpoint.
And I think there's also something beautiful about things having endings, like to have that full arc.
Absolutely. Yeah. To be able to put your pen down or whatever it is and be like, all right, I've created that. What else can I do now? And that's kind of the same. I mean, yes, I'm still telling stories, but like we talked about earlier, when you're starting a new process, every door is open and you don't have to compare it to anything. So when I write my next book, that is a novel, like I've written other things that aren't a full arc storyline, but when I get to do that, hopefully I get to start over. And that's intimidatingly awesome to think about.
What does being a nerd mean to you?
Being a nerd to me, I think means finding a community of people that share the same thing as you. Because I think there's things that we all do that we think are quirky and we are the only ones who must like this or the only ones who do this. And then I think that starts to feel like a little isolating. But what I love about nerdy things is there are so many people that like the same thing as you and that will talk about that thing with you and laugh and giggle and cry. And it's just another way, it's another venue to find a connection with people. Even sharing this little carved butt little guy, that's opened up a whole new community for me of people who like to work with wood. And I'm learning about not just the woodworking itself, I'm learning about people. And so what is it to be a nerd? I think at the end of the day, it's another way to learn about people.
I love that. And finding that community.
Yeah, passion. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's cool too is, I don't know how old you are, but when I was in middle school, a lot of those things that we considered nerdy are the things that people love today and the communities that I think are growing the largest. And so I am excited for people to have outlets like social media in order to help them find a greater audience than just maybe themselves in the thing that they like to do.
I definitely think social media helped with making these nerdy things cool. Because it used to be people would be embarrassed or ashamed. And now I think social media has really helped embrace all of that.
They make it look amazing because it is, like they're showing a side of it that's like, hey, I'm not just collecting these things. Like I know about these things. Like I know a history of this thing. And it's pretty awesome.
So before I ask if you have a geeky recommendation, is there anything you wanted me to talk about or ask about?
No, this has been phenomenal.
Thank you.
Because what I like about podcasts, and this one specifically, is when you get a new question, selfishly, I'm learning more about myself too. Like I didn't know half the answers I was going to give you. And so to have a different perspective coming in and asking me about what I do, I really appreciate. And not just because I'm alone every day by myself and I finally get to talk to another human, to have someone ask you questions about your process, such good questions, is really enjoyable for me. So thank you. You've covered so much. I'm just like really happy about it.
Thank you. Yeah, my goal with creating the show was to make sure that it wasn't a typical interview because that also wouldn't be fun for me. But I wanted to have more of a conversation about things. So and ask different sorts of questions too.
Okay. Well, I feel like I talked a ton, so hopefully this felt a little bit back and forth.
No. Yeah, it definitely did. No, this has been amazing. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah. I'm very excited to put this out there. Before we wrap up, I like to give listeners a geeky recommendation to help them embrace their nerdiness. And I had a hard time thinking of what I wanted to share today, and I wanted it to kind of go with the theme of what we were talking about. And at first I was going to recommend reading, and then I was going to recommend going to the library, and I definitely recommend those for sure. But I think I'm going to recommend following your passion no matter how old you are. Just doing it, because you don't have to be perfect at it at all, ever. You can just start now.
Oh, I totally agree. Can I chime in too? Can I add on?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes. So what's great about starting something new, maybe this is kind of a nerdy thing, but I'll bring it up anyways. So I was a runner for so many years. I ran collegiately. I've done marathons and ultra marathons, but my knees don't like doing that anymore. So I needed to find something else that was active. And so I stumbled upon climbing. And so there's a climbing gym or like a rock wall, and I'm not good. I fall often. But the great thing is there's a bunch of other people there who have also just started, and we're learning together. So it doesn't feel like this intimidating process, and we cheer each other on. So following your passion, even if you're, later in life, there are going to be other people who are also starting a passion like that. And you can form a whole new community that you just didn't know existed pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. So is that your recommendation?
Climbing?
Yeah.
I would not recommend climbing for everybody. I have blisters on my hands and cuts all over the place. No, I don't know that I have a recommendation, but something that I've always enjoyed. If you can't go rock climbing or running, or you need something just to dive into or something new to read, web comics. Oh, there's so many good web comics out there. I've always followed the Oatmeal, which has some things that might not be so kid friendly. There's things like that exist that just haven't been. I mean, the Oatmeal is pretty popular, but there's other ones like that where you can go find some pretty relatable humor to make your day a little lighter. Your recommendation is amazing. I fully back that. Maybe your night cap can be reading a webcomic or two.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show. This was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about being an author. I'm always so fascinated by that process and what it takes to get there. So it's cool to have that behind the scenes look.
Oh, good. I hope I painted a good picture. I'm still learning every day. Most of the time, I send Erin emails that say, "Hey, could you tell me about what this is?" Hopefully that she won't have to deal with those emails for too much longer.
So where can people find you? Where can people find your books?
So you can find me on Instagram, and my Instagram is just at Matt Eicheldinger. And instead of trying to spell my name, it'll be tagged on the notes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then my books are hopefully going to be found everywhere. We're in every single Barnes & Noble. We're going to be in many independent bookstores. If you do decide to buy my book, or actually any book, support your local bookstore. They are the people that keep the world running for literature, and actually a lot of nerdy things as well. There are a lot of indie bookstores that carry some nerdy stuff that I think you'd be surprised about.
Awesome. Yes, everybody definitely go check out that book. It's really, really good. And congratulations again on publishing.
Yeah, maybe we can do an update podcast a year from now. What am I doing?
Oh my God, I would love to do that and see what the process has been like over the next year. Yes, let's do it. All right, everybody, if you can please rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you are on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. And then you could also have a chance to look at the little wooden figure that Matt showed us throughout the show. Feel free to email me all of your nerdy things at thatnerdthingpod@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok at thatnerdthingpod. And please share the show with your nerdy friends. And I will see you next time.